The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the guests appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of 8 News Now or Nexstar Media Group.
Every difficult decision was rooted in a long-term strategy for economic recovery.
Tonight on Politics Now, the plan is working. The message from Governor Steve Sisolak as he lays out what he wants to do with an unexpected $600 million. The First Lady visits Las Vegas, her stops at UMC, and an honor for a local teacher. Plus,
the Biden administration wants to create a public option for health care. I'm Alexandra Limon in Washington with the details of how that would work coming up.
And facing execution, concerns of a lack of transparency from the state about how they will execute ZANE FLOYD.
From 8 News Now, this is Politics Now.
Thank you very much for joining us. I'm John Langler, and we start with good news for Nevada's economy. The budget has nearly $600 million more than expected. So that is money from a combination of extra tax revenue and federal money from congressional stimulus bills. Lawmakers here in Nevada now have $586 million more than the prediction from the Economic Forum in December. The state budget was built off of that December prediction. So what is Nevada going to do with that extra money? Well, Governor Steve Sisolak says the state needs to reinvest in itself, just like you and your family might.
We need to take the same approach. We need to refill our savings account, pay off our debts, and restore the difficult cuts that we suffered in areas like mental health and education. We need to bring our state back to a baseline, and we also need to fix what's broken by investing in new systems, including the one at Dieter.
The governor praised the belt tightening done over the last year to deal with the budget shortfall. You'll remember lawmakers drained Nevada's rainy day fund and cut some essential services early in the pandemic. About 350,000 Nevadans don't have health insurance, and we also rank near the bottom on health care affordability. And those are two reasons Senate Majority Leader Nicole Cannizzaro is trying to create a public option for health insurance. Senate Bill 420 had its first hearing this week. It requires insurance companies that offer coverage to Nevadans on Medicaid to also offer a public option. Those plans would also be marked down 5%, with the goal of that markdown being 15% in 4 years. Cannizzaro says now is the perfect time to take advantage of the state's bargaining power to lower costs. Republican State Senator Ben Kekeffer asked about the cost to hospitals.
Just because we say that a health insurance plan needs to have premiums that are 15% less, that doesn't reduce costs by 15%, right? It may actually increase costs and increase utilization, and there are a lot of different factors that could happen downstream. Who's going to pick up that cost?
I pose a question that it is more expensive to cover individuals who come in for more acute conditions through the utilization of emergency services more often than not, or where a condition has gone untreated for a significant period of time, and therefore the treatment and mitigation of whatever that disease is far more expensive and far more intrusive and difficult to deal with.
The bill would also increase coverage options for pregnant women. That cost was estimated to be $75 million this biennium and $103 million the one after that. The Silver State Health Exchange estimated another $10 million. Most of that is because of Medicaid changes. If approved, the public option would start in 2026. First Lady Dr. Jill Biden was in Las Vegas this week, and shortly after surprising the Teacher of the Year, which we'll cover later, she thanked Valley nurses and stopped by UMC to show her appreciation. Joe Moeller was there.
It was a big day for us.
From smiles to tears.
Surprise, excitement.
There was a mix of emotions at UMC Thursday.
She said she thanked me, and yeah, it was wonderful.
The First Lady, Jill Biden, made sure to thank healthcare workers. Amy Runge has been a nurse for 24 years, and this past year, she says, has been the most difficult.
It was exhausting, it was tiring, it was part of history.
A managing nurse now, Runge is thankful Dr. Biden is shedding light on the work being done.
That Washington, our president, our First Lady supports Nevada, supports nursing, supports UMC Hospital. It's huge. I'm proud.
Nurses even walked away with a unique White House baked cookie.
That I don't know if I even want to eat because it's so pretty. I may just freeze and save.
The CEO of UMC, Mason Van Houweling, knows it has been a long year for these healthcare workers.
Really focusing on their mental health, their social health, and just try to keep morale up. And with the First Lady's visit, that certainly helps with that morale boost.
Joe Mueller, 8 News Now.
And as I mentioned, a little later in the program, we'll tell you about Nevada's first National Teacher of the Year, who the First Lady surprised Thursday morning. The next big goal for the Biden administration is passing the president's infrastructure plan. Now, one part of the plan deals with everything from health care to education. It's called the American Families Plan. Secretary of Health and Human Services Javier Becerra says it would provide coverage similar to Medicare. Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell says the plan's $2 trillion price tag is far too expensive.
Unmask the unfairness of some families who have to work to be able to pay the rent or the mortgage, feed the family, yet can't go to work because their children were not able to go to school.
Our colleagues on the other side of the aisle just can't resist stretching out the pandemic, using it as a rationale for additional spending far beyond what is best for the country.
Joining us now to talk about this is Alex Limon from our Washington, D.C. bureau. President Biden's infrastructure plan has two parts. There's the traditional infrastructure for things like transportation, but let's talk about the second part and the highlights of the American Families Plan.
President Biden is billing this American Families Plan as the second half of his infrastructure proposal. And what the Biden administration says is that this plan invests in human infrastructure. And the reason is that the bulk of the plan focuses on investing in things like education and health care. So, for example, the administration is proposing free universal preschool for all 3 and 4-year-olds. 3 and 4-year-olds, as well as free community college for 2 years, and that would include free community college for dreamers, for example. The administration says it also wants to invest billions and billions of dollars in child care, saying that low and middle income families, for example, shouldn't have to pay more than 7% of their income toward child care. And then another highlight of the health care aspect of this is that they want to provide paid family medical leave to all families, making that available when they need it, as well as a public option for health care insurance. This is something that progressives, have talked a lot about, and that the administration is now saying they want to make a reality. And I spoke to the Secretary of Health and Human Services about how that public option would work, and he says the idea here is that it would be available nationally so that it creates competition amongst health insurance companies to ensure that Americans are getting the best health insurance at the best prices. So some competition would be injected into that field, essentially.
Republicans have expressed opposition to the first part of the infrastructure package, which was about $2 trillion. What's been the response from the GOP on Capitol Hill to the second part?
Well, they hate the second part even more, and it also comes in at a cost of about $2 trillion. So altogether, you're talking about close to $4 trillion in costs. In addition to that, Republicans say this second part of the plan, they don't consider it to even be infrastructure or infrastructure related, so they don't think it should be part of an infrastructure proposal. Senator Mitch McConnell this week also said he accused Democrats of being unable to let go of the pandemic, saying they continue to use it as an excuse for essentially endless spending when it doesn't need to happen, according to McConnell.
And again, that was Alex Limon from Washington, D.C. The state of Nevada is planning to execute ZANE FLOYD. However, his lawyers and even a federal judge are questioning a lack of transparency from the state. The I-Team's Vanessa Murphy was in a federal court hearing this week and tells us what unfolded.
This used to be Albertsons, and this is where ZANE FLOYD walked inside and killed 4 employees and injured another in 1999. Now, more than 20 years later, the state of Nevada is trying to execute him.
There's not a whole lot I can say to the families.
That was ZANE FLOYD more than 20 years ago. Now, while Nevada lawmakers are considering abolishing the death penalty, the state is trying to move forward with plans to execute Floyd. It's not yet final, but a date could be set for early June. The Nevada Department of Corrections, or NDOC, has released no details. A spokeswoman tells the I-Team information will be released no less than 7 days before the execution date. Floyd's defense team points out Floyd has a right to know which drugs will be used to kill him, and lawyers need time to review the plan. The Nevada Attorney General's office, which represents NDOC, argues if the names of the drugs are released, drug companies may sue to make sure their drugs aren't used for lethal injection. That's what happened in the case against Scott Dozier, the last inmate Nevada tried to execute. Federal Judge Richard Boulware even questioned the lack of transparency Thursday and wants lawyers back in court Monday. The head of NDOC testified but revealed no information about the plan. Director Charles Daniels said he takes his duty to carry out the execution seriously and pointed out, quote, "There is no do-over button," end quote.
I can't take back what I've done. If there was any way I could, I would.
And Judge Boulware asked several questions about why there is so much secrecy about the plan to execute Floyd. We are potentially 4 weeks away from Nevada's first execution in about 15 years with no information released. Vanessa Murphy, 8 News Now.
Meanwhile, a bill that would abolish the death penalty here in Nevada has already passed the state assembly. It had its first hearing in the state Senate as well. However, Governor Sisolak says he does not support a full abolition of executions. Next on Politics Now, a plan to build a smart city.
Where we had a real problem was the separatist local government.
Up next, we speak with Story County about the governor's plan to create a semi-autonomous government for one company up in northern Nevada. And we take a look at how much money the governor has stashed away for a re-election run in 2022.
Welcome back to Politics Now.
So we've been telling you about the ambitious plan to allow businesses in rural northern Nevada to create their own mini governments called innovation zones. So that is now a study. But first, let's show you where we're talking about first. It's up here in northern Nevada, up in Story County, where they plan to build a smart city on 67,000 acres of undeveloped land. This is in the Tahoe Regional Industrial Center. The Tesla Gigafactory is right there as well, all sort of part of this innovation zone they wish to create. Now, the plan was pitched by Blockchain LLC. And Blockchain said that local governments were simply inadequate to properly deal with their innovative technologies. So they wanted to create their own semi-autonomous local government within Story County. Well, I spoke with Story County Manager Austin Osborne about how it all went down.
The plan was not to involve Story County, at least the way it was drafted, the way it was discussed. What frustration was there from Story County's point of view on the way things were going?
The frustration, and some of it is even to this day, we were never provided what the bill draft review was to look like. So the best thing we could do as a team is to work on what we did have, which was some document that was provided us in March that was to resemble a bill draft, but we weren't sure exactly, if that was going to, be what was to be dropped in the legislature or not. Where we had a real problem was the separatist local government. The idea that for some reason that, a county or Story County can't keep up with them, to move any faster, so that they have to separate into a completely other government. We opposed very strongly, and we met with legislators and we met with regional leaders and talked to them about that position. And we met with a group, the proponents as well, and said, you want to do almost all of the things you want to do, technology growth, residential growth at a try, submit an application. Get a 30-day grading permit, get a 5-day grading permit, get a 30-day building permit, go through the plan unit development process. We'll get you up and running, but don't separate from local government.
The separating would be detrimental to Story County. Okay, fine, they want to do their own thing. Why should Story County be a part of the process?
Well, there's different parts to it, but one is they want to separate into a separate local county, but we would continue providing the services to that county. Fire, sheriff, assessor's office, building department. How is that going to work? What happens if we have the building department, if it just doesn't work? And then as they grow over time, they want to start taking away certain services that they don't want us to provide anymore. You could get into a situation where there is one group of building inspectors inspecting buildings that don't have any control from us, but then it's our fire department folks that have to go in and respond to that life safety emergency or a fire. That's one issue. Another issue is revenues. We have strategically zoned property throughout our county to make sure that when we see residential and other growth occur in the next 20, 30, 50 years, that we have enough tax base in order to cover the services that will be required to do that. This proposal takes away a third of the county, including a lot of the industrial and commercial zone properties, potentially could lead to other annexations in the future. The bill draft that we were provided did not address those, and we're concerned about that.
Are you glad with how this ended up concluding?
At this point, I think the best answer to that is, like I said at the beginning of this, we would like to see innovative technology happen in our county, whether it's technology out at Tri-Center, a smart city out there at Painted Rock, that sort of thing. So I look at it and say, there's still opportunity for good things to happen in the county, just not in the way it was being presented.
The saga continues. On Thursday, Governor Steve Sisolak introduced Senate Concurrent Resolution 11. So that'll create a joint special committee to analyze this innovation zone proposal for the future. That committee would then submit a report before the end of the year and come up with a new bill draft moving forward. This week in Following the Money, we want to take a look at the potential 2022 governor's race. Current Governor Steve Sisolak has built a pretty big war chest already, with more than $4.5 million already for the end of 2021. He raised a record $11.3 million in the 2018 campaign, and you can see that number there. He raised a lot of money when he first became governor. Now, meanwhile, the Republican challengers, potential ones anyway, that list is taking shape. The list includes Congressman Mark Amodei, Clark County Sheriff Joe Lombardo, former Lieutenant Governor Mark Hutchison, and North Las Vegas Mayor John Lee. That will sort itself out in the very near future. Next on Politics Now, back on Facebook, deciding whether former President Trump can go back on that social media platform. And the National Teacher of the Year is from right here in Clark County. We'll introduce you to her next.
of us together.
You're watching Politics Now.
Former President Donald Trump may get his Facebook page back. We're just not really sure when. This week, Facebook's Independent Oversight Board weighed in on his indefinite permanent suspension. Mr. Trump was kicked off after the January 6th Capitol Hill riot. The board said this week it was not appropriate for Facebook to impose the indeterminate and standardless penalty of an indefinite suspension. It told Facebook to review the matter within 6 months.
There are actually clear rules within Facebook themselves in their community standards to which penalties and sanctions they can use. But in this case, they chose not to use any of these, but use an indefinite penalty, and they can't do that.
The board agreed the former president violated Facebook's rules, prohibiting praise or support of people engaged in violence. In a statement, Mr. Trump called what the social media companies have done, quote, a total disgrace. But he will stay blocked for 6 more months, and then a final decision is expected. The number of registered partisan voters in Nevada continues to drop. In April, active registered Democrats decreased, as you see there, by about 1,180. Active Republicans decreased by about 2,300. Nonpartisans increased in Nevada by 8,000 voters. This week, Democratic Senator Jackie Rosen was back here in Nevada and toured some Strip properties. The senator met with staff over at New York, and T-Mobile Arena. Rosen back in Las Vegas after chairing the first subcommittee meeting on tourism. As part of the American Rescue Plan, states like Nevada received millions of dollars in federal funding to offset job losses and help try and boost the travel industry. Next on Politics Now, the Teacher of the Year in our own backyard.
Teaching is heart to work, it's a work of the heart.
We'll introduce you to Nevada's first National Teacher of the Year.
Family will fight for yours.
Booker Elementary School teacher Juliana Urtubey was crowned 2021's National Teacher of the Year, and she's from right here in Nevada, up in Las Vegas. Kirsten Joyce shows us her surprise.
First Lady and English teacher Dr. Jill Biden traveled here to Las Vegas to surprise this year's National Teacher of the Year, Juliana Urtubey, live on CBS This Morning.
Look at Juliana. I mean, yes. She is just the epitome of a great teacher, a great educator.
Urtubey is a special education teacher at Kermit Booker Elementary School.
Teaching is heart to work, it's a work of the heart, and it's about connecting and making relationships.
One of the things that I love the most is I love learning in the garden.
Affectionately called Miss Earth, she's used a garden as her classroom and has raised funds for garden programs at 2 schools.
It was a bit like a dream. There's some butterflies around and ladybugs. I think it just changed my life.
She's known for going above and beyond, meeting her students' differing academic, social, and behavioral needs, many of whom are English language learners.
I would describe Ms. Urtubey as kind-hearted, all-knowing, fun.
Que ha sido siempre incondicional.
She just wants to say thank you for everything, taking care of all the kids and just looking out for everybody.
It's been a challenging year for teachers, helping students navigate learning in a pandemic.
Hopefully, all of America after this pandemic has seen what teachers have done. Who taught you that?
Urtubey will spend the next year serving as an ambassador for education and advocate for all teachers.
Each school is unique and they have their own special set of needs, and so that's why I'm advocating for a joyous and just education.
A mission she's already made her life's work. Kirsten Joyce, 8 News Now.
And Governor Sisolak also declared May 6th a day in honor of Urtubey. Congratulations to her. In this week's What to Watch, some key dates for the state legislature. May 14th is the deadline for bills to pass out of their committee in the second house. The next day is the deadline to finish resolving all of the budgets for state agencies, now that we have the new economic projections. The session is scheduled to wrap up in Carson City on May 31st. And with that, we thank you very much for watching Politics Now. We'll see you again next week. Take care.